Stephen Assanti is a name that I've heard for a very long time. Since the beginning of my channel, people have been asking me to cover his antics, and for some reason or another I always put it off. Until today, and I absolutely see why people have been telling me to get on this. Because Stephen is a very unique person, and by that I mean he's extremely manipulative and narcissistic. He's also 800 pounds at certain points in this video. But it isn't just Stephen. His entire family is one of the most dysfunctional I've ever covered, and his family is a great place to start this story, because a lot of his issues stem from his childhood. Stephen Assanti was born December 2nd, 1981, to his father Steve Sr. and mother whose name I wasn't able to find. The family would soon have another child named Justin, and for a couple of years things were halfway normal until Stephen's parents separated, and Stephen cites all of this as the reason for his weight gain. He's actually given a lot of different reasons, but we'll get deeper into Stephen's childhood later in the video. But all you need to know for now is that Stephen and Justin hated each other. Justin has always claimed that his brother Stephen made his childhood a living hell, mistreating both his father and brother, mainly when he didn't get what he wanted, and this behavior would carry over into his adulthood. Like I said, we'll talk more about Stephen's childhood later because it ties in, and honestly, it's far less important than what we're about to discuss. And that's the beginnings of Stephen's internet journey. In his mid-20s, Stephen would move out into his own apartment. The exact details of that situation are vague, but I can only assume that it was paid for by one of Stephen's parents, most likely Mr. Assanti. And when Stephen moved out, he would begin posting videos of himself online, specifically to YouTube, which was still in its infancy. He would post under the name Fat Boy Get Down, and to see a moderate amount of success with his dancing videos and absolutely unhinged rants. Eventually, behavior like this caught the attention of none other than Dr. Phil, who had began a radical new project. At the time, Dr. Phil was putting together a show called House of Hatred, and the premise was pretty simple. Put individuals who would usually despise each other in a house together, having them live and interact together for a significant period of time. Examples of these individuals would be a black woman who hates white people, a white man who hates black people, a skinny girl who hates fat people, and a fat guy who hates skinny people. An absolutely fascinating premise, but for some reason House of Hatred is considered lost media. I don't know if it's because the Dr. Phil crew wasn't too happy about what they made, or if it's just one of those old TV things, but man, I would have loved to see the whole thing, because from the bits and pieces I was able to gather on YouTube, most of the contestants absolutely hated Stephen. They all seemed to be getting along halfway well. Despite their biases, everyone was getting along, except Stephen, who refused to clean, said absolutely disgusting things, and had probably the poorest attitude that I saw. Even the white supremacist wasn't a big fan of Stephen. He said that he didn't like how he was talking about his anatomy to the ladies of the house, and of course, the women hated him. Like I said, I wasn't able to watch much, but it seemed like everyone in the house had united around their shared hate of Stephen, or at least their disdain for how messy he was. So I think maybe some people were able to take some lessons out of the House of Hatred, except for that skinny girl that hates fat people. They could not have reinforced her biases more. In one clip, they talk about how they put her in a fat suit and had her do things as Stephen, and I'm beginning to realize why this is lost media. One thing I was able to find that I found extremely insightful was an interview that Dr. Phil did with Stephen near the end of House of Hatred. During this interview, Dr. Phil calls Stephen a con artist. He says that he's been manipulating people in the house to clean for him, and also he hasn't been cleaning himself. Everyone in the house has been complaining of Stephen's body odor. Dr. Phil says that he's manipulative, belligerent, and arrogant, all characteristics of Stephen that you'll see in this video time and time again. I wasn't able to figure out if Dr. Phil kicked Stephen out of the house, but I know that he did offer offer Steven some resources for weight loss, and they were either not accepted or not taken seriously, because in the next few years, Steven's weight would get absolutely out of control, making him bedridden and forcing him to move back home with his father and brother. Eventually, he got so bad that he had to be taken to the hospital and to stay there for a significant period of time. Steven had become infamous in his home state of Rhode Island for doing this, and during this particular hospital stay, he would order a pizza while on their weight loss program, and he would be kicked out of the hospital for doing this, making Rhode Island news, and also putting him on the radar of My 600 Pound Life. My 600 Pound Life is a reality show on TLC. It documents many different people's journey to bariatric surgery, their recovery, and life after, and Steven was contacted for a chance to participate in this. His brother Justin, who is also now over 600 pounds, also accepted, and for the next couple years they would film Steven's journey, but we wouldn't know the depth of just how bad things had gotten until Steven's episode released in 2017. Things were so bad that it was a 2-part episode, almost 3 hours covering the past few years of Steven's life. The episode begins with clips from a news story where a 700-pound man, Steven, was kicked out of the hospital for ordering a pizza to it. It then cuts to Dr. Now, the primary weight loss surgeon on My 600 Pound Life, talking about how Steven is coming to his facility, that he might be the most problematic case he has faced yet, and that he's heard Steven is problematic. We then cut to our introduction of Steven, revealing that he is over 700 pounds. The show also follows his brother Justin, who is over 600 pounds. The two of them do not get along, but it's been less of an issue since Steven moved out. Steven Assanti was living at a hospital. He had become so obese that he was bedridden, but he was being kicked out due to mistreating staff, so Dr. Now was his only hope. We then get a look at the Assanti family home, occupied by Steven's brother Justin and their father. After giving us a little bit of backstory, their dad takes us into Steven's room and talks about the time he opened the closet to find over a dozen pizza boxes inside, all very empty. Steven's father reveals that he will threaten him for pizza, claiming that Steven has even lied to the police when not given his way. Steve Sr. also talks about how he's worried for Justin, hoping that he doesn't end up like his brother. Justin really dislikes Steven. He calls him a bully, and that things have been good since he left for the hospital. Justin says he is also worried about ending up like Steven, and that he will be visiting Dr. Now with his brother. We then learn more about their childhood, which they claim is the source of many of their problems. The entire family claims that their mother was an alcoholic, and that after the parents separated, she would spend her time at the club, leaving the boys at home alone with food. They said that their mother would buy them anything they wanted to keep them quiet, allowing her to live the lifestyle she wanted. Eventually, one night she went out and didn't come back, moving away with a new boyfriend, so the boys would move back in with their father. Steven would move out for a brief period, but eventually he found his way back, and it spiraled into what it is today, which is not good. Justin recalls a time that Steven and his father got into a fight. Police were called and Steve Sr. was arrested, only for Steve Jr. to drop the charges when he was offered a large pepperoni pizza. The family was extremely dysfunctional, but they were all going to make the trip together to Houston from the East Coast, so it was going to be a multiple-day drive. And for this trip, Steven would be transferred by medical RV, staffed by a driver and onboard caretaker. The RV would be followed by Steve's father and brother, who, like I said earlier, was also seeking treatment. The road trip was expected to take around 30 hours to complete, and 2 hours in, Steve was already hungry, calling his father and demanding that he get him food. And he would end up getting that food. Steven claims that he wants to eat at every restaurant they pass because he doesn't know when the next one will come. And this issue would be reoccurring throughout the whole trip. Then the RV hits a pothole and Steven's bed breaks, so the driver and onboard nurse decide to slide the spare tire under there. Steven's father proposes that they put cinder blocks under the bed, and the driver tells everyone that the RV is also suffering mechanical issues. And during all of this, Steven's nurse, ironically enough named Steven, is wondering what led him to this point in his life. And after successfully constructing the cinder block frame for Steven's broken bed, they continued their journey. The next day, Steven tells us that he had breakfast at 4 a.m. and then lied, acting like he hadn't had anything, to receive more food. The trip had barely begun, and Steven's father had already made multiple runs to get him fast food. And Steven always had this smug look about him when he got his food, especially when he knew the cameras were on him. To me, it looked like Steven was already making a joke out of the whole thing, and I think other members of this trip were feeling the same way. 2 hours later, Steven would call his father for even more food. Steven says he wants what he wants, and he's gonna get it. When his father doesn't get him the food, Steven starts angrily calling him, saying that he's feeling weak and that if something happens to him, he'll be very sorry. Eventually, Steven's father does cave and gets him a Subway sandwich. Justin says he's not surprised. His father usually caves to Steven's demands, which is true because Steven's father would bring him more fast food numerous times before the trip was over. After about 2 days in the RV, they finally arrive at the facility in Houston, Texas, greeted at the door by Dr. Now, who already seems to know that this is going to be one of the most difficult cases of his career. When Steven first meets Dr. Now, he immediately talks about the pain that he's feeling in his legs from the trip. He says that the trip was very hard on him and that he's had no painkillers the entire time. This is another aspect of Steven's character, and will only become a bigger problem with time. And Dr. Now picked up on it almost immediately, saying that his body language indicates that he really wants it, also calling Steven a very addictive and pathological personality. Dr. Now also hopes that Justin will not have the same problems. Dr. Now also comments on the dysfunctional state of the family, saying that it is in a downward spiral. He would also tell Justin that he wanted to keep him at the facility to run some tests and make sure that he was okay as he could be. And Justin wasn't thrilled by this, telling staff that he wanted to leave, and he refused to speak to Dr. Now. He said that he didn't need help like Steven did, despite being 600 pounds himself and knowing that he has a heart murmur. He claimed that whatever happened, he would be leaving the hospital tomorrow. Steven asks the nurses to help him go for a walk so that he can go and see his brother and encourage him to stay at the facility, but Justin immediately demands that Steven leaves, telling staff that I hate his guts. Justin would leave the hospital the next day, saying that he shouldn't have put himself in a situation where Steven could pressure him into anything. After Justin left, they would weigh Steven, showing that he was 730 pounds. But aside from that, tests had shown there were no major issues with Steven's health. They would also start Steven's diet that day. 1,000 calories, high protein, low carb. Dr. Now says that Steven has been good for the time being, but has also displayed some erratic behavior, and he thinks that as Steven settles in and the honeymoon period wears off, the problems will begin. Steven's dad and brother then come to say goodbye, and Justin once again says that he will not be staying, and that he's very excited to get away from Steven. We then cut to Steven a month later, and he says that his hospital visit so far hasn't been too bad. He says that one of the only issues that he's been having is that people don't respond to the call button quick enough. The nurse that serves him his food seems frustrated, so I assume that Steven has already made a bad name for himself amongst the staff. Steven seems to get really frustrated when two things are taking longer than he expects, and those two things are meals and pain medication. medication. And by the third month, staff was very fed up with Steven, and that honeymoon period was fully over. Dr. Now admits that they are starting to develop problems with Steven, and that his pathological behavior has started to come out, saying that he is mistreating hospital staff, and that he expects everyone to wait on him hand and foot. Dr. Now would eventually confront Steven on this behavior. He tells Steven that it's time for him to grow up. He also tells him that the nurses are agitated and that he needs to work on his behavior. He tells Steven that if he hears of this issue again, their next conversation will be very different. And I am once again reminded of the utter savagery displayed by Dr. Now. I'll never forget the time that someone told him they didn't want to get malnourished following the diet that he recommended, and Dr. Now simply asked them if they looked malnourished. I would say give this man his own show, but that's basically my 600-pound life, and I attribute a lot of the show's success to Dr. Now's scathing remarks, but I digress. This talk between Dr. Now and Steven only made the situation worse. The nurses claim they've never seen a patient like Steven before. He asks for pain medication every 15 minutes and will spill his urine container when he doesn't get his way. As soon as Dr. Now heard of this behavior, he would go to confront Steven. Steven says he knows that he's been misbehaving and that he's sorry, but Dr. Now says that his apology means nothing and that they are done treating him. He tells Steven that unless he has an emergency, he will not be readmitted. Steven begs the doctor to let him stay. He says he has nowhere to go, and Dr. Now informs him that if he does not leave, he will be dropped at the nearest homeless shelter. Dr. Now tells Steven that he needs to call his father and arrange somewhere else to live. We then cut back to the Assanti household, where Justin is putting together a mini. He says that he's been maintaining his weight and not following the diet plan. We then see Dr. Now calling Steven's father, breaking the news that he's been kicked out. Dr. Now tells Steven's father that the only way he can remain in the program is if he moves into an apartment, and his dad would fly out the next day to assist Steven in the move. Before leaving the hospital, they do a final weigh-in with Steven, showing that despite him making staff's life a living hell, he has lost 107 pounds. It's clear that the program was working, but just not to Steven's liking. After leaving the hospital, they would move Steven into an apartment, and as soon as Steven sat down in his new home, he demanded that his father order him a pizza. His father said that he learned a long time ago to not fight Steven. If he wants pizza, he's going to get it, failing to realize his hand in what's going on by enabling Steven's poor behavior. Steven's dad would ask for a singular slice, saying that he hadn't eaten since 6 a.m., but he was refused. 1 month later, and Steven's condition seems to be worse than ever. The only thing that seems to have gotten better is the way that he treats the people that help him, finding a caregiver princess who said she liked a challenge. But Steven was getting worse in almost every regard, even missing his first appointment with Dr. Now since being kicked out of the hospital. We flash forward another month, and it's been 2 months since Steven was kicked out. His caregiver princess cannot get a hold of him, and receives no answer when knocking on his door, so she enters to find that Steven isn't there. She notices that both of his walkers are still in the home, so assumes that he was taken out by wheelchair. She then hits redial on his phone, and finds out that the last place he called was a hospital. She also noticed a recently filled medicine bottle that was empty. When Princess did find Steven, he was at a hospital, seeking out more medication. All of this caused Princess to contact Dr. Now, saying she believed Steven was gaining the system for these medicines. So Dr. Now decided to show up at Steven's apartment, and we get our first look at Steven in over a month. He is less than excited to see Dr. Now, and noticeably missing a large portion of his hair. Dr. Now notices a pizza box in the trash can, and asks him if he's been losing any weight, but Steven doesn't really give him a response. Dr. Now reveals that they know all about his addiction, and that he's been to the hospital 20 times recently trying to seek out medications. He tells Steven that if their appointment next week doesn't go well, he will be dropped from the program. We then cut back to Rhode Island and to see that Justin has been making an attempt at his weight loss. He says that he hasn't been sticking to his diet, but has been getting in exercise by taking a mile walk to the park. He also claims that it is much better around the house without Steven, but that he still calls their dad all the time demanding pizza. It appears that the situation with Steven in Houston has put their father back financially. I'm guessing that he's paying for Steven's apartment and all of the stuff that he wants, like pizza. So he's been complaining more and more about money issues as time's gone on. Justin says that his father bought Steven pizza 8 times this week already. Justin says that this is contributing to Steven's problems, and his father gets up and walks away. We then cut to Steven being transported to his meeting with Dr. Now, and when he steps on that scale, he's over 700 pounds once again, gaining 83 pounds back since he left the treatment facility a couple of months ago. And I thought that this meeting was going to be a bloodbath, but in a twist I didn't expect, Dr. Now gives Steven one more chance. He tells him if he can lose 60 pounds in this next month, that he will continue to treat him. Dr. Now did give him a second chance, but he also comments on Steven's manipulative behavior, that this is all a performance to him, just another avenue to get what he wants. And the doctor would be proven right far quicker than he ever expected. On the drive home from his meeting with Dr. Now, Steven would demand to be taken to the hospital because he was in pain. Princess asks Steven if he thinks this is going to work, that this will fool Dr. Now. She says that he claims he's in great pain but smiling the whole time. It seems that despite their good relationship, even she knows the truth behind Steven, that he's extremely manipulative and lying at almost every turn. I'm sure that you could already guess Dr. Now knew what Steven was up to, and that he would come to meet him at the hospital to officially cut him off as a patient. Dr. Now tells Steven that he has a substance problem, and that he has no desire to change, that he believes that this whole trip to Houston was just to feed his bad habits. He had spent 6 months halfway across the country and only gotten worse. He tells Steven that you're done manipulating the system with me for now, and that he's going from there to rehab. Steven says that he thinks this program will be a waste of time, and the introductory episode to Steven Assanti ends. But in a very rare occurrence for My 600-Pound Life, the brothers would get 2 episodes back to back. And I gotta say, what happens next is undoubtedly crazier than anything that has happened so far. The second episode begins with Steven being transported to rehab, and it's something that Steven is not very excited for. Steven admits that he was conning the hospitals for prescriptions, and also admits that his addiction has gotten out of control, that he is risking his life every day with the amount that he's taking. And this admission serves as a small sliver of hope in what will become an increasingly darker story. But Steven's attitude also reminds me of when he was in the honeymoon period at the hospital. All smiles, all positivity, and it quickly wears off. After entering the rehab facility, Steven is immediately escorted into a room with doctors and the CEO. They ask Steven about his addiction and the source of it, which he credits to a gallbladder surgery that he had around the age of 25, never losing the habit that he had acquired. He says that he doesn't want to end up like Prince and all of these other celebrities, showing just how out of touch he had become because of the presence of cameras. Steven was on TV before during the House of Hate, but in no way was he a celebrity, especially not right now. But camera crews had been following him around for 6 months, and his ego became yet another thing that was out of control. During this discussion with doctors, Steven also goes in depth about how he scams hospitals, claiming that his right leg is in overwhelming pain, and that gets him what he wants. house. The doctors inform Steven that he will have to go through a medical detox at a hospital. It will be the first leg of his journey, and it could take anywhere between 3 to 10 days. But Steven's problem was so severe that he needed 24/7 monitoring. One of the first things that Steven asks is if it's on lockdown, and if he can have his phone. When they tell him no, he asks if they have internet access. They explain to him that it's a secondary concern right now, and Steven says not to him, he needs to contact his people. And I already know this is going to be a disaster, but Steven does accept the help, and is admitted to the hospital for detox. We then cut back to the Assanti household, where Justin and his father are playing Monopoly. Justin says that he's been doing a lot better since Steven is gone, that when he was around, all he did was put Justin down, and the attention was always on him. I want to remind you that the Assanti brothers are both over 30 years old at this point, both living at home until Steven became too medically unwell to even live there. It's like the movie Step Brothers, if it was horribly sad. Justin says that he wants to start his own hobby shop, and Mr. Assanti will be helping him. Justin's dad thinks it will be a good thing just to get him out of his room. He says Justin has been doing much better since Steven left. He also says that Steven is one of the most stubborn people he knows, and hopes that the rehab facility will be able to break him, because he wasn't able to. I've covered a lot of situations in my time on the internet, but this has to be one of the most dysfunctional families I've ever seen. We then cut back to Houston, where Steven is 4 days into his stay at rehab. We're also informed that Steven demanded a higher dose of his detox medication and was denied. And then we hear a phone call between Steven and his father, where he begs to go home, claiming the hospital treats him like a criminal, that he's exhausted, and he just wants to go home. He also calls it the Devil's Playground. Needless to say, he's making staff's life a living hell. But despite all of Steven's protests, he would spend another 3 days in the facility, and after 7 days they would release him back to the rehab. And shockingly, he would be sent home, back to his Houston apartment. When he enters his apartment, he realizes his caretaker Princess has not dropped off his medication, and he is absolutely seething. Princess informs Steven that it will be $150, so of course, Steven calls his dad and begs for the money. Steven says that if he ends up making a bad decision, then it's on them. It is mind-boggling to me that a man in his mid-30s wants to blame his inability to pay a $150 bill on two of the only people that actually put up with him anymore. We then cut to a couple weeks later and get a good look at Steven's apartment, which is turned into an absolute wreck. Steven tells us that after blowing up at Princess for a second time, she resigned as his caretaker, but that she's coming over for one last visit to say goodbye and to take back a TV set that belongs to the care company. But Steven says that it's his, and he's not going to let her take it. He says that she can drop off his medicine, get him something to eat, and go. Princess says that Steven's behavior since detox has been completely unacceptable. He's not been sticking to his diet, not been listening to the doctors when it comes to his medicine, and very mean towards her. Princess hands Steven some paperwork, says she's going to fix his laundry, and that when she returns, she'll be taking the TV that she gave him, which was a loaner from the company. And as soon as she walks out the door to go get Steven's laundry, he calls the police. When Princess comes back from getting Steven's laundry, the door is locked, and Steven tells her that the police are on their way due to the TV dispute, and she almost can't believe her ears. Princess says that it doesn't matter because the TV's coming with her. She has no issue talking to the cops on this matter. Eventually, Steven does let Princess back in to take the TV, and he tries to call the police back to cancel his previous report. And after months of being on good terms, this was the last time that Steven would ever see Princess. Flash forward a month and Steven is already back to his old tricks, once again in the emergency room complaining about leg pain. During this visit, Dr. Now shows up out of nowhere trying to calm an irate Steven, who is demanding something for his leg pain. Dr. Now comments on the side that he doesn't believe Steven has detoxed, and that he looks bigger than he's ever seen him before, and that Steven is pulling his hair out again. Basically, Steven is worse than he's ever been, and Dr. Now says that they have to start the detox process all over again. After Steven calms down and they move him into another room, Dr. Now requests that they weigh him, and Steven weighs in at 808 pounds, up yet another 100 pounds since his last weigh-in. But shockingly, Dr. Now offers Steven a chance to get back in the program at the hospital, to go through detox once again and start a controlled diet. After the utter hell that Steven put staff through during his last stay, this was shocking. But I think the doctor's reasoning was he believes this is Steven's only hope, and that in his current state he doesn't have much time left. We then cut back to Rhode Island, and it's a very exciting day for Justin, the opening day of his hobby store. It's called Hobby Haven, and it's still in business today. Earlier, in a bit of the video that I've now deleted, I talked at length about how irresponsible I thought this was of Justin. I talked about how hard I thought it was to start a hobby store, and how it was even harder to keep them open. But I just want to say he proved me wrong. This hobby store has brought nothing but happiness and success to Justin, and this will become more and more apparent as we catch up to the current day in the timeline. The episode then jumps back to Steven 1 month into his hospital stay, but this is actually his last day in the facility, claiming he doesn't know why they're kicking him out, and that he's been behaving so much better this time. But before leaving, there was one final weigh-in. Dr. Now enters the room and Steven gets up for the weigh-in. He tells Steven to put on a gown, but Steven says it's not anything he hasn't seen before.
Doesn't mean that everybody else needs to.
During the final weigh-in, Steven comes in around 720 pounds, and Dr. Now is at least pleased with this progress. He decides that Steven is ready to return home to his apartment, but Dr. Now stresses the importance of seeing a therapist, because for the past 8 months he had been refusing to see one. Dr. Now also sets a goal of 40 pounds a month weight loss for Steven, and instead of asking any questions about the therapist or his diet, he requests more prescriptions from Dr. Now. When the doctor tells him that he has no need for it, Steven claims that he's still in pain. Dr. Now refuses and leaves the room. He comments about how Steven doesn't like authority, and that before any treatment can occur, he needs to change his behavior. Back in the room, Steven is talking about how Dr. Now doesn't understand his pain, and that makes him not a good doctor. Steven claims that asking him to lose weight and see a therapist is a lot to ask from him in the next month, but that he's gonna try because he doesn't want to blow it. A couple days later, Steven would meet with the therapist in his apartment. The therapy session goes about how you'd expect. Steven admits that he does have an eating problem, but nothing else, claiming he's got everything else handled. The therapist is also very aware of Steven's manipulative nature, but other than that, the visit was mostly uneventful. The therapist claims that he is just trying to establish a rapport with Steven, not yet ready to confront him on anything. We then cut to a week later and Steven says that he's actually doing much better, sticking to the diet and listening to what the therapist told him. Steven tells us that his dad just flew into town, and that he's excited to see him. The reason his father flew in is because they need to find Steven a new apartment, that this one is just too expensive. And the second Steven's father comes in the door, he starts talking about how gross it is in there.
Oh my God.
Steven's dad says that it stinks wicked bad. Steven Sr. says that between paying for this place and Justin's store, he's going broke. And it immediately hit me who he reminds me of. A much less threatening Paulie Walnuts from The Sopranos. Much like how Paulie has to pay for his mom to stay in a nice nursing home and kick up his cut to Tone, Steve Sr. has to pay for Steven's apartment and Justin's store, claiming he almost lost his house because of all these expenses, so he was very upset over the condition of the apartment. Steven's dad says that he's not going to make too many comments because there's only so much he can take, but he asks his son if he's willing to imagine a reality unlike the one he currently lives in. And Steven basically says no. His dad leaves, saying that he'll be back tomorrow morning, and that if they don't find him a place by Thursday, he doesn't know what's going to happen. We then cut to 3 days later, where Steven and his father are spending the day looking for apartments. So they put Steven on the back of a golf cart and take him to the location of his new apartment. But after going up a curb, Steven falls off and then claims to be in tremendous pain and demands that they call an ambulance. Steve Sr. says he doesn't think his son fell for real, and even more so that he doesn't need an ambulance. His dad is torn between calling the ambulance or leaving Steven. He says that Steven has done this so many times that he has no idea if he's actually hurt, but they do end up calling the ambulance, and he tells them his whole body hurts. Steven's dad asks him if he thinks he can get up and walk to the ambulance, to which he does not respond well.
You're kidding me!
Likening it to a miracle. His dad thinks that this is all an act, saying that Steven has run out of excuses with his leg and now he has to resort to this. The ambulance tells Steven and his father that they cannot access where he currently is, so they convince Steven that the only opportunity they have to move him is if he gets up and enters his father's van. And when they do, he drives away and doesn't take Steven to the hospital, another thing that he's not very happy about. The two then get into a fight where Steven's father accuses him of not being in any pain. Instead of taking Steven to the hospital, his father takes him to the therapist, in a very relieving putting the foot down moment. Steven's dad has long enabled his behavior out of many different emotions, but it looked like Steve Sr. had finally had enough. The therapist comes out to the car to greet Steven and his father, who are both attending the session today, but Steven says he's in a lot of pain and he needs to get to the hospital. Steven refuses to attend the session, so his father goes alone. And while his father and the therapist are having a very productive conversation, Steven is calling emergency services trying to get into the hospital. The therapist convinces Steven's father to go outside and tell the EMS crews what's up. Mr. Assanti tells them a little bit about Steven's history, all the while Steven is denying all of this. But eventually the paramedics do leave, and despite his best efforts, he did not go to the hospital. We then cut ahead another couple days, and they have finally found a place for Steven to move into. After getting yelled at on the phone by his other son, Justin, Steven's dad spends the night moving all of his things into his new apartment. And after that, his dad leaves to return to New Jersey, saying that he'll see Steven again when he gets the operation done. We jump ahead yet another month to see Steven doing worse than ever. There is junk food everywhere in his apartment, and today's the day that he has his appointment with Dr. Now. Steven claims he knows that he has gained weight, but will still meet with Dr. Now to face the music. When he did weigh in, he gained another 20 pounds in 1 month, and when Dr. Now enters the room, it's an absolute bloodbath. He tells Steven that he's made no progress, and when they do help him, he undoes all of their work.
Absolute failure.
Dr. Now asks what the next weigh-in will come in at, 800 pounds? And Steven responds somewhere around 6, and Dr. Now claims that that's impossible, showing that he's lost any faith that Steven will make progress. Steven then has the gall to ask Dr. Now for more medication. Steven claims that it's to help him work out, and Dr. Now is speechless. I love how Steven frames it as going to see Dr. Now to face the music, when he's really just looking for any way to scam for medication. He thought long and hard about how he was going to ask this to Dr. Now, and came to the conclusion that the best way would be through weight loss, or at least that's what he'd tell the doctor. Dr. Now asks how many times Steven has been to the emergency room in the past month, and Steven replies somewhere in the realm of 5 times. Dr. Now then shows Steven some medical documents that he requested, showing that in the past year Steven had received over 30 prescriptions from 17 different doctors. The doctor informs Steven that his days of doing this are over, and Steven immediately leaves. Dr. Now tells Steven that he's sending all of this information to a database, and that the next time he pulls something like this, he'll be arrested. Then, in one of the most savage moments I've ever seen on television, Dr. Now tells Steven that he has something to show him, making him walk to another room where he stands in front of a mirror, and the doctor requests for him to look at himself in it.
Look.
It's clips like this that have made Dr. Nowzaradan a living legend. He has absolutely zero issues pointing out the obvious to his patients, which I personally believe results in more success and better care. What I'm trying to say is not all heroes wear capes. The entire time that Dr. Now is asking Steven to look at himself in the mirror, he is clearly uncomfortable, almost unwilling to do it, but in the brief few glances he gets, he is not pleased. It's almost like the reality of the situation is finally setting in, at least in that moment. Despite all of this, Dr. Now did not cut him off as a patient, telling him that if he returned next time and hadn't lost any weight that they would officially be done. So when Steven returned home, he attempted to be active and stick to his diet, at least when the camera was on. He would throw out all of his soda and take walks outside barefoot, which he claimed were incredibly painful. After this, we cut back to Rhode Island and see Justin. He says that the hobby store has been a struggle in the past few months, but that he's also thinking about going to Houston to seek out weight loss surgery. He then has a video call with Dr. Now, who asks him how his weight has been doing. Justin says he doesn't know, he's not a fan of the scale, and Dr. Now tells him that he needs to learn how to use it if he's ever going to get his weight down. Dr. Now also recommends therapy to Justin, who thinks that it's not going to be very much help. So he asks Justin if he wants to get weight loss surgery, and he is interested. So Dr. Now gives him the goal of 30 pounds a month weight loss. Justin agrees, and things are looking hopeful, at least back in Rhode Island. We then jump 2 months forward back to Steven, who is going to be weighed by Dr. Now, and for the first time on his own, Steven would lose weight, a significant amount actually, 73 pounds, and Steven was thrilled. Dr. Now would tell Steven that he is proud of his progress, but he still needs to see more before he's approved for weight loss surgery, giving him the goal of 40 pounds weight loss in the next month. Steven then goes home and reflects on his relationship with his brother Justin. He says he knows that his relationship with his brother has not been good, and it's because of the way that he's treated him. But Steven claims that as he moves farther away from addiction, he wants to repair that. So he video calls his brother. He tells Justin that he wants him to get the surgery, and that he really cares about him. He also apologizes to Justin for everything that he put him through in the past. Justin says that his forgiveness needs to be earned, and that's basically where the episode ends, but it is nowhere even close to where the story of the Assanti brothers ends. 2 years later, they would feature in an episode of My 600 Pound Life, Where Are They Now?, giving us much awaited insights about how the two had been. The original episodes end on a somewhat positive look, so I was just hoping that the brothers had kept that momentum. And in some ways they did, but in others not so much. Season 5, Episode 1 begins with Steven 1 year and 7 months into his move to Houston, and Steven tells us that it's been a couple months since his weight loss surgery, claiming that with weight loss, his mobility and quality of life has increased. He's not a big fan of solid food, so he's been getting the majority of his calories through liquids. He also says that he likes the new him, and that he doesn't want to go back. The relationship with his brother Justin has improved significantly. Steven hopes that his brother will be getting the surgery soon. We then cut over to Rhode Island, where we see Justin, who is working in his hobby shop, Hobby Haven. Justin says that he wants to go to Houston to get weight loss surgery, but that he'll have to remain there for quite some time in recovery. So he's been getting all of his affairs in order, trying to exercise and meet the weight loss goals. He expresses his concern in leaving his business for a significant period of time, but has a friend that will run it for him while he's gone. Even still, he hopes that Dr. Now will allow him to return home early. He then gets on a video call with his brother Steven, Steven, and they talk about Justin's upcoming trip to seek surgery. Justin doesn't seem thrilled by the move. He says it's going to be too hot, and he still seems pretty annoyed with Steven. The call ends, and Justin says that he's really not looking forward to it, and that he knows Steven is just going to try to annoy him. After that, we cut to a montage of Justin and Steve Sr. packing for their move to Houston. Justin's father will be moving with him for the time, and the two seem generally positive about the move. Steve Sr. seems optimistic about Steven's progress, also hoping that he's been able to remain clean. Justin's dad suggested that they stay with Steven, but he refused, claiming that it was non-negotiable, and honestly, I don't blame him. 3 days later, the pair arrives in Houston, after a much calmer road trip than they had with Steven. Steve Sr. immediately wants to go see Steven, and Justin says that he's not interested. And when they call Steven on the phone, a fight ensues. Justin tells his brother that he's not going to visit him, and Steven says he doesn't care because Justin's rude anyways. And it becomes apparent to me that Steven was lying when he said his relationship with his brother had improved. When the phone call ends, Steven's father is pissed at Justin, telling him that he's hurting his brother's feelings.
You don't think it hurts his feelings when you say like that?
Justin's father demands that he calls his brother back and apologizes, to which Justin refuses. Steve Sr. says he'll turn this car around right now, and that he doesn't care about Justin's surgery. He then tells his son that you two should be fat, and this sets Justin off. He strikes his father numerous times, and Steve Sr. acts like nothing even happened. After all of that, Justin is dropped off at the hotel, and Steve Sr. goes to see Steven. After seeing Steven and criticizing him lightly, his father tells him he's impressed, that his weight loss is noticeable, and that he's proud of him. Personally, I think that Steven was a little out of it, and I don't know if his dad noticed that too because he quickly left. The next day, Justin and Steve Sr. go to see Dr. Now for his weight loss surgery, to see if he can finally be approved for it. But when Justin arrived at the office, he wasn't off to a good start, as he had recently gained 4 pounds. When Dr. Now enters the room, he asks Justin how much he's eating and what kind of stuff. He says only 2 to 3 times a day with no snacking in between, and that his meals mostly consist of chicken.
How much?
Justin says that he's cut out nearly all of his carbs. He's only been eating chicken. Steve Sr. asks how this is even possible, and Dr. Now says that if you're telling me the truth, then it's the portion size, that he's eating enough chicken to gain while currently being 600 pounds. Dr. Now then gives Justin the weight loss goal of 60 pounds in the next 2 months, and sends him on his way with a new high-protein diet plan. A couple days later, we cut to Steve Sr. and Steven going to see Dr. Now. He is getting another weigh-in after his weight loss surgery, and when they arrived at the facility, Steven had a great weigh-in. He was expected to lose 20 pounds, and ended up losing nearly 100. I'll admit, it was a turnaround that I never expected. And for once, Dr. Now enters the room in somewhat of a good mood. He tells Steven that he's doing well. The only thing that he'd recommend him to work on is his bodily hygiene, mostly to help with the worsening condition of his legs. Other than that, like I said, the doctor was pleased, and he sends Steven on his way. He says in private that he is still cautiously optimistic about Steven's progress, but that so far it's been promising. A couple of days later, Steve Sr. manages to convince Justin to go and see Steven. He tells him that it will help him with his own weight loss goals, to see just how much progress his brother has made. When they arrive, Steven nearly refuses them at the door. Steve Sr. has brought cat food for the cat, which he claims is sick, and that would explain the puppy pads that Steven has down. But like I said, Steven didn't seem thrilled to see them, even screaming at them through the door before eventually letting them in.
John, just let me in.
When Justin enters the apartment, you can tell that he is uncomfortable. He knows that his brother is going to try to pull something, and that's what I was expecting because Steven showed no interest in his father, only in Justin. Steven starts by acting kind towards his brother, but then also starts to mention the drawbacks of the surgery, claiming that he was in so much pain. To me, it all seems like Steven is trying to subtly influence his brother against getting it, but that's just a theory, and it didn't seem to work because Justin would remain in Houston to seek out his weight loss surgery, and the next time that he would weigh in with Dr. Now, he had lost nearly 50 pounds in 1 month, reaching his goal and making him available for weight loss surgery, and the surgery would be completed without any issues. Steven refused to attend, citing his brother's lack of support during his own surgery, but he would eventually go to see his brother while he was recovering in the hospital, and it actually went pretty well, with Steven and Justin having one of the best interactions I've seen this entire time. But after Steven and his father left, Justin would say that he's not looking to repair anything with Steven. He hopes that he continues to get healthier, but he doesn't think they can salvage their relationship. We flash forward a couple of weeks, and Justin's recovery is going well. He has been positive about his stay in Houston in almost every regard, except for Steven. Justin claims that a couple of days after his surgery, his father would bring Steven over for a visit, which went halfway well, but Justin noticed that after Steven left, some of his medication was missing. He claims that his father won't even confront Steven about it, but that it's just a sign of a greater problem, that Steven doesn't really care about what happens to his brother, just what he can get out of him. As if the situation couldn't get any worse, Steven then calls his father to ask how Justin's recovery is doing. Justin doesn't want to speak to Steven, and when his father forces him to, he confronts him on what happened. And of course, Steven denies stealing from Justin, and Steve Sr. is enraged by Justin's question. He admits to knowing that Steven still has a problem, and Steven demands that they don't talk about it. The phone call quickly ends, and Justin has an argument with his father, revealing some pretty disturbing information. He reveals that Steve Sr. has had a hand in Steve Jr.'s habit, facilitating the theft of Justin's medicine, even admitting just how much he had given Steven. I have no idea how he roped his dad into this, but Steve Sr. is one of the biggest enablers I have ever seen. The food is one thing, but this new revelation is a completely different matter. Justin actually needed that shit. He just had massive surgery, and Steven already has a problem with it. The argument ends, and in private, each of them lament on how they think they are correct. In my personal opinion, Justin has been very wronged here. He's no angel himself, but this is just nuts. And I think Justin saw something like this coming, which is part of the reason he's maintained as little contact with Steven as possible. But as always, he found a way to get what he wants. Needless to say, the future was looking very bleak for the family. We then cut to a couple of months later, and Steven has once again managed to worm his way into Justin's life. He convinced his father to schedule his doctor's appointment on the same day as his brother's, so they were both on the way to the hospital for a checkup, and tensions were high. Justin announces that he wants their appointments to be separate, not in the same room, and I don't blame him, but if it was me, I would spill the beans to Dr. Now, let him know just what was up with Steven and his dad's little operation. But then again, that's illegal, and I think they'd probably both go to jail, so Justin kinda has his hands tied behind his back. I understand their fathers want to reconnect his sons, but it's clear that Steven is still just using Justin to his own ends. After Steve Sr. starts yelling at Justin, he breaks down, and tells us the reason that he doesn't want to be anywhere near Steven. He says that he used to beat the crap out of him every day for 18 years. Steven responds accusing Justin of similar behavior, showing a scar on his hand where he claims Justin stabbed him. This car ride is already an absolute disaster, and I think this was all according to Steven's plan. And when they arrived at the clinic, Justin refused to see the doctor, citing Steven as the reason, so only Steven and his father enter to see Dr. Now. Dr. Now enters the room and asks where's Justin. They tell him about the situation, so he suggests that they just see Justin after they're done with Steven. But Steve Sr. doesn't know if that's gonna work. He'll ask him, and the doctor basically says no, you'll tell him, and that Steve Sr.'s attitude towards the boys in this regard is part of the problem. He tells Steve Sr. that he needs to act like a father, and to go get Justin right now. Dr. Now also reveals he knows of the theft of Justin's medication, and that he'd be pretty pissed too if he was in his situation. An absolutely beautiful moment because Steven has been trying to act like the good son in the background this whole time. Despite being told all of this by Dr. Now, Steve Sr. still takes a pretty soft approach with Justin, and he decides to stay in the car, showing no interest in his follow-up appointment. Justin was done with the program, but Steven still had his appointment, and it went about as well as you'd expect. We start off with the revelation that Steven had recently gained 34 pounds back. The doctor then drops the bombshell on Steven that he knows of the theft of Justin's medication, and that they're going to run some tests on Steven to see if it's true. If so, the doctor claimed there would be serious consequences. He tells Steven that if he wants any way to remain on this program, A, his tests need to come back clean, and B, he needs to lose 75 pounds in the next 2 months, or he will no longer treat him. The doctor also kinda goes off on Steve Sr. He says that there's a line between discipline and love, that the boys are grown adults and they're still relying on their father, and that all of these problems start there. I can't say I disagree with the doctor. From a distance, Steve Sr. seems like he might be strict, I think due to his nature of being critical, but he has absolutely no follow-through with it when it comes to his sons. They walk all over him. Hobby shops and apartments in Houston don't just fall from the sky, and there's really a dual meaning behind that. Steve Sr. has worked hard to provide his boys with these things, but in doing that, he's made them into terrible people, both of them expecting just about everything that they ask for. Personally, I think there's a bit of guilt in Steve Sr. He knows the way that the boys were treated by their mother, so he can't bring himself to tell them no. I agree with the doctor. The entire family was dysfunctional, in a way that I think no one has ever seen before. We then cut to 3 days later where Steve Sr. and Justin are packing up to return to Rhode Island. Justin had made up his mind and no longer was interested in the program. Steve Sr. said that Justin needed something to calm down, so he got him a new puppy for the trip. This is just yet another fine example of Steve rewarding his children's bad behavior. It's crazy that I even call them children because they're both 30-year-old men, but Jesus, Steve Sr. makes it so goddamn easy. How could you ever expect them to go anywhere? Call the police on him, you get a pizza. Refuse to go to a doctor's appointment, which they drove through multiple states to get through? Well, son, you seem upset. Let me get you a puppy. It is absolutely no wonder that these two ended up this way. The episode ends with a montage of Steve Sr. and Justin making the trip back to Rhode Island. They say that Steven's been talking to someone from Des Moines and is considering moving there, but other than that, we don't hear anything else about him. This was a Justin-centered episode, but it also revealed so much about Steven's recovery, that it had been an absolute roller coaster, and it didn't end on a good point. But my 600-pound life would check back in on Steven one more time, in the very next season of Where Are They Now? Season 6, Episode 6 picks up just where the last one left off. Justin had left Houston because he couldn't stand Steven for another second. Before we go any further, I want to point out that TV crews have been following Justin and Steven off and on for the past 2 years, having around 6 hours of television time in the process. But this would be the last time that the brothers were featured on TLC, and after watching their episode, I understand why. It opens with Steven talking about his brother's sudden decision. He basically calls Justin weak. He says that his brother's decision is a loser move. Then out of nowhere, he shaves his head. He doesn't even put anything down either, he just lets it sprinkle onto the carpet, and then covers himself with the baby powder. After that, we cut back to the road trip that Justin and Steve Sr. are undertaking. Justin talks more about his hate for Steven, and how he never wants to see him again, but his dad won't respect that, so he's very angry with him. But Justin said that his dad helped pay for a puppy as a peace offering, and he says that that dog has helped him with some of the stress that Steven's put him under. Justin claims that another reason he had to return was because of his store, that it needed him. Justin says that he's ready to get back to work on his weight loss, though. And we skip ahead what seems to be another 3 months, and Steven is attending another appointment with Dr. Now. When he weighed in for his appointment with Dr. Now, he had lost only 4 pounds, but he still claimed that he was very pleased with it. But Dr. Now is not. He enters the room and immediately starts laying it on, telling Steven that his weight has plateaued and that he's probably eating too many carbs. Steven says that he thinks he's doing great when asked, but he has one question for Dr. Now. Why is it that when he eats solid foods, he throws it up? The doctor immediately responds with, "'Cause you're eating too much," telling Steven that he needs to consume solid foods in smaller portions. He questions why Steven isn't wearing any shoes, and he says it's because he can't fit into them. And then after letting out an audible sigh, he also questions Steven's personal hygiene habits.
You heard of something called soap and water?
I think the doctor already knows the answers to all these questions because he then starts going in on Steven about his personal hygiene. I gotta say that this is one of the most brutal conversations I've ever heard with Dr. Now. He doesn't like to sugarcoat things, but this was an absolute bloodbath. He basically told Steven that he stank and that he had made no progress in his weight loss journey. He tells Steven that he smells so bad that multiple members of the staff are sick. Steven tells him that he just showered the other day, and Dr. Now says that he thinks Steven hasn't showered in weeks. But other than that, the doctor says nothing on those tests. It seems that once again Steven has gotten away with his bad behavior. After Steven's appointment, we cut back to Rhode Island and ahead yet another couple months, and it's been 2 years since they've started documenting the Assanti brothers, and we once again see Justin, who appears to be doing very well. His hobby store is thriving, and it looks like he's lost a significant amount of weight since the surgery. He says that the hobby store has helped him with his social anxiety and weight loss. We would also be told that Steve Sr. would be traveling to Houston to see Steve Jr., which he did, and all was going well until Justin had a medical emergency. In the hobby shop one day, he just got weak and collapsed, so his father rushed back to Rhode Island to see him, and Steven wasn't happy about this. He locked his father out of his apartment and refused to see him. Back in Rhode Island, Justin is having a video call with Dr. Now. When the call begins, Dr. Now immediately goes in on Justin for leaving Houston early, telling him that it was against medical advice and life-threatening. Justin said that he had to return to the store because he was losing money, and that he had responsibilities back in Rhode Island. Other than that, the phone call was relatively uneventful. It seemed that Justin's medical emergency wasn't serious, but Dr. Now still recommends that he goes to a local clinic to both monitor his weight loss and make sure he doesn't suffer any health complications. We once again jump back to Houston and 2 months into the future, and the long-awaited tests have finally come in. And needless to say, Steven didn't pass, so Dr. Now finally decided that he could no longer treat Steven. I think this is extremely wise. Steven didn't really have any plans of changing, just new ways to feed his habits. But despite the news, Steven put on a positive face for the camera, claiming that he was clean and fully taking care of himself. Steven then reveals the source of his happy nature. He's been talking to a woman over the past couple weeks, and she's coming to pick him up. He claims that she's his girlfriend, and that explains why he is cleaning. He says that her name is Stephanie, and that he'll be moving to Iowa into a house with her and her daughter. I just want to add in, someone should get this woman a Parent of the Year award. Her name is Stephanie, so I'm just going to call her Stephanie. Stephanie, you've made an amazing decision for not only yourself, but your whole family. I'm sure it's all worked out nicely for you. He says that they met online and things are beginning to make a lot of sense. He says that he's excited for the Iowa move, but a little bit nervous. He doesn't know how he's going to give parental guidance to a teenager, but claims that he'll just go with the flow. He says that Stephanie is going to be so good for him. She doesn't even believe in frozen foods, only home-cooked meals. And she's also super enthusiastic about helping helping him with all of his goals. How much of this is the truth, I have no idea, but I'm beginning to understand why this is the final episode of the Assanti brothers on TLC. Steven's new situation is horrifying, at least to me, based off of knowing all of his history. Steven says that the only thing that hasn't improved is his relationship with his father and brother. He says that they're jealous of his new girlfriend, and that their accusations of her being a lady of the night hold no weight. A month later, Steven would now be living in Des Moines, and officially married to this Stephanie woman. This is a grainy picture of their wedding, and his father and brother did not attend. Things were finally starting to look up for not just Steven, but also Justin. Back in Rhode Island, he was looking at an apartment. He says that his weight loss and the hobby shop are both doing great. Then Justin starts talking about Steven's new relationship with Stephanie. Justin and his father both thought Steven was messing with them, and were pretty surprised when he made the move to Des Moines. But he still says he has no interest in a future relationship with his brother, and that's about all he's heard of him. We skip ahead another 2 months, and Justin is better than ever. Steven was now living his new life in Des Moines with his wife and stepdaughter, so Justin hadn't seen or heard much of him, which was how he liked it. Steve Sr. also seemed in much better spirits, as they packed up all of Steven's stuff to be put in storage. Justin said, and I quote, that I am happy to have every last trace of Steven out of here. He could not hate his brother more, and from what I've seen happen, it's completely justified. He says he has no idea what type of person would want to marry Steven, but he doesn't care because he's so happy that he's out of his life. He finally says that his brother is just an evil person, but that he's finally gone, so now he's able to live a quiet life. Steve Sr. says that he's happy for Steven. Every now and then he thinks of him, but he says he's also sad. He knows that the move will lose him the help of Dr. Now, and I'm wondering if he was ever informed that Steven stopped seeing the doctor because of the failed tests that Steve Sr. himself had a hand in. Sometimes I can't believe that this story is real, but then I remember I'm watching the Learning Channel. We then skip ahead almost 2 years and see that Steven has once again reached out to Dr. Now for help. Steven says that he's been maintaining his weight and actually having problems at home. He says that his wife is considering a divorce, so he's been considering returning to Houston to seek out further treatment. The doctor requests to look at Steven's leg, and after doing so, he claims that his lymphedema has gotten worse. The doctor also says that Steven looks closer to 700 or 800 pounds, and Steven confesses that his eating habits have not been good. He's been back to eating pizza, saying that he eats pizza 4 or 5 times a day. The doctor says that it's possible he has completely undone his weight loss surgery by stretching his stomach back out. The final episode featuring Steven would end with a statement from Dr. Now. Dr. Now says that it's unfortunate to see that Steven has undone all of the progress that he made in Houston. He really hoped that Steven would surprise him by turning it all around, but says that Steven has actually gone in the opposite direction and only gotten worse. Dr. Now refuses Steven the ability to return to the program in Houston. He says that he won't take resources from someone who really wants to turn their life around, because he believes that Steven does not. And the episode ends, but it's not quite the end of the story for the Assanti brothers. We'll start with what happened to Justin, because he has far and away made the greatest turnaround. Hobby Haven still operates to this day, now being more centered around Warhammer, which has exploded in popularity in recent years. So Justin's shop has been successful, but that's not all he's done. He also lost a substantial amount of weight. This was the most recent photo I could find of him, and he looks amazing. To me, it seems like he might have even got skin removal surgery already. And he also got married to a woman who shared similar interests, and they are still together to this day. Ever since the TV show, Justin has been pretty private. He put most of his time and energy into the hobby shop, his weight loss, and marriage. It's all worked out wonderfully for him. It seems like Steven had a pretty extreme psychological impact on him, one that has taken years to undo, if it even has been, but now his future looks extremely bright. Unlike his brother Steven's, all of the issues that Steven Assanti faced during filming continued into the present. After the final Where Are They Now, rumors were floating around that the Assantis would get their own TV show, but even if that was true, it never materialized. And I think it's not only because of the brothers' fractured relationship, but also Steven's unwillingness to get better. Eventually his wife had enough and left him sometime in the early 2020s. During his time with his wife, Steven was more private, but after their divorce he would begin posting more on Instagram, showing his worsening physical and mental condition. These are clips from some of Steven's live streams back in 2022, making it around 4 years since TLC stopped filming. Like I said, Steven's physical and mental conditions had severely deteriorated, most notably gaining a significant portion of his weight back and losing almost all of his teeth. It would also be around this time that Steven would start a cameo, and in the beginning this price was $15, but as I've been making this video I've been checking back on it, and the price has fluctuated numerous times. One time I even saw him charging $265 a pop, but these days he still wants $65. And after he deleted the Instagram that he live streamed all of those videos on, this would be the only form of social media I could find him active under. And this was one of the most recent videos I could find of Steven.
It's me, Alex. The one and only. It's me, Steven Assanti. I hear that you love my episodes on TLC, and that you have 2 boys that are autistic, and that you work hard for your family, and that you recently lost a staggering 150 pounds. Now, I know how hard it was or must have been to lose that 150 pounds, because I have a problem losing 5 pounds, just 5, okay? So, congratulations, Alex. For real. Hello to your wife, Emily, your wifey, Emily. And, yeah, man, I hope you have the best Father's Day ever. And hello again to your 2 boys. And I hope you have a beautiful, blossoming relationship for the rest of your life. God bless.
He has lost all of his teeth. He looks thinner than he was in 2022, but not by much, and seems really low energy. I would say that Steven is at the lowest point in his life. Steve Sr. is still alive and little is known about him, but I still wonder if he financially supports Steven. My theory is yes, Steve Sr. is a massive enabler, but Steven has no one else to blame for his current situation. No one made him do all of these things to himself. He wanted to, and made people's lives a living hell along the way, and I really think that he took pleasure in it. The way that Steven would crack a sly smile when talking about scamming the system or not sticking to his diet really makes me think that this is all a game to him, just a way to manipulate more people and get more stuff, and he exhausted all of those resources. His brother, TLC, Dr. Now, Dr. Phil, his wife, almost everyone but Steve Sr., and we don't even really have confirmation that they talk. I think that Steven's life is worse than ever, and that from the looks of it, he doesn't have long. His lifestyle will soon catch up to him. How it hasn't already, I have no idea, but Steven will never change. He has been given the best opportunities that he will ever get, and turned every single one of them down, or even worse, into some kind of joke. But he never seemed to realize that the only person all of this was for was him, and now he has to live with the consequences of a future no one wanted but him.